Welcome to our podcast. I'm Rachel.
I'm Jackie.
And I'm Aaron.
Today on Filmanthropee, I will be discussing the contributions of Black directors in Hollywood, as well as the controversies surrounding what representation should look like in film. To start us off, Aaron, Jacqueline, do you have any favorite directors? If so, who? What aspects of their films appeal to you?
I'd say I'm a huge Get Out fan, huge Nope fan, so I think I'm gonna have to go with Jordan Peele as of right now. And then like M. Night Shyamalan as well. Huge fan of both.
Good choices, good choices.
No, it's just like, who are your favorite directors?
Yeah,
Or like what?
it could be anyone.
Three favorite movies.
Yeah.
Your top.
Okay. Well, I'm a big fan of Us, actually. If we're talking about Jordan Peele,
Okay, yeah.
that was good as well. I have not yet seen Naomi by Ava DuVernay, but I'm thinking about, watching that now. And then I'm not sure who directs this one, but I'm interested in Vampirina because Wanda Skies is a voice actress in that.
Oh, yeah?
I want to check it out.
And Vampirina.
Yes. I know it's like a kid's show, but I
Yeah.
feel like it would be very entertaining.
Yeah, it would be.
I live under a rock, so I don't know any of these things. But that's okay. To start us off, a little historical background. African Americans have struggled with underrepresentation throughout American history. Underrepresentation in film and media is no exception to this. Early in film history, cinema was very racially biased as the white majority dominated the industry. They'd even dress in blackface and adhere to stereotypes, further integrating racial discrimination into society. Not standing by this, a counterculture in film arose, which was referred to as race movies or race films, and this took place around like the 1920s-ish. These were films focused on the central themes around being Black in America, featuring an all African-American crew. Throughout history, representation in mainstream television and film has slowly increased. In 1969, Gordon Parks Sr. was the first director in a Hollywood film that was African-American. Come the 1980s, African-American directors made up 2 to 3% of the industry. By the 2000s, this tripled to 6 to 8%. Current statistics indicate African-American and Black directors make up 7.1% of the industry, which is low in comparison to how much they make up in the U.S. population, which is 12 to 13%. How would race films impact actors and actresses in the industry?
That's a great question. So during the 1920s to around the 1950s, Black individuals were not given much screen time at all. And because race films were recorded outside of the Hollywood industry altogether, it gave Black actors and actresses the chance to, be shown on screen. And it's kind of an outside genre, so these films were not seen by many people. And there was originally 500 race films created. And as of today, there's only like 100 that everybody can keep track of and still view. But it did give Black individuals, the chance to be on film, which was something that wasn't very prominent back then. So it definitely has a huge impact on the industry, even if it isn't the direct Hollywood industry. And it's important to consider, the outside genres.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely influential in the ways that it's kind of like a subgenre or like counterculture to like what mainstream media typically looks like. What about you, Aaron? How did race films impact or influence some of like the inventions of film or maybe directors in film?
Yeah, I feel like these play like a significant role in the development of like cinema in general, but specifically African American cinema, and it like helps to create a sense of representation and empowerment for Black viewers as well. So it's both the empowerment of the individuals within the movie, but as well as those who are watching this movie. They like independent filmmaking was a huge thing because these shows weren't backed by major studios. People were shilling out their own money to make these videos, to make these films, and so I feel like that helped establish Black-owned production companies, which in turn influenced like the evolution of cinema as a whole.
Yeah, that's great. Also going along with some of like the beginnings of like African American and Black individuals being brought into the film industry. Outside of race films or race movies, eventually there was like a breakthrough in like the mainstream hegemonic Hollywood scene, and that featured with our first African American director, Gordon Parks Sr. in 1969. A little bit about him is he was the first Black individual to direct a Hollywood film. Directors are the artists of the masterpieces. It's their vision and their perspective which really shapes the film. Parks made a huge splash at the time as his films went against mainstream media and provided perspective which wasn't previously presented. His films were designed to reflect 3 items, and these 3 items he personally felt were what made up like being a Black man in America. A lot of this he based off of his personal things, and those were invisibility, emergence, and ascendance. How do you guys interpret these 3 items? What do you think Parks means by invisibility, emergence, and ascendance?
Okay, well, just from the research I've done in my own personal experience, I've been focusing on actors and actresses. So I'd say that the invisibility aspect of that quote is kind of how Black individuals were invisible. They were just used as extras behind the Hollywood film industry. And instead of actually representing the real Black experience, there was blackface and just white actors and actresses taking over and basically shielding the entire Black experience. And emergence is over the years when we start to see Black actresses and actors in films and start to show themselves for who they truly are as opposed to just stereotypes. And the ascendance, I would say, is today's world where we have, Ava DuVernay when she's directing Naomi, and just Black people are now taking over the film industry and showing what has been repressed for the last century because they are ascending, just like Gordon Parks stated. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I feel like invisibility, emergence, and ascendance can correlate to before, during, and after. Before conflict and visibility, in the sense that they didn't have mediums of expression during this time. And by mediums of expression, I mean no Black directors in mainstream Hollywood, no Black films in mainstream Hollywood, which contributed to invisibility. And the emergence part would be the during, where there was larger access for producers, directors, actors to express themselves. And ascendance is what we see today, where Black actors, directors, and filmmakers are encouraged, they're celebrated, and they're awarded for their progress.
These are all really great takes on these 3 elements. It's really interesting how you both interpreted them, as in Parks' films, this was actually a very biased reflection of his own personal experiences, and this is how he felt like defined what it meant to be a Black man in America. So these 3 items were things that he tried to portray throughout his films. So invisibility relates to, despite centuries worth of repression, Black men will often still seek peace over violence, which is more of like a passive response. And then with emergence, he refers to how oppression of Black men causes Black men to self-reflect, resulting in creative expression, so outlets for other means. And this really like strikes home with like Parks' personal experience, because that means was creative expression through film. The 3rd item, ascendance, then relates to self-acceptance and rising above all the obstacles and seeking for refuge and security through cherishing family, as this was something that Parks himself really valued, and he valued that every male should eventually just find that confidence through good family relations, if you will. Now knowing this, do you guys feel that Gordon Parks' contributions are still reflected in today's cinema?
Yeah, I generally think so. Tyler Perry is one example of this. I can say when he mentioned, people finding themselves through security. You can say through cherishing family, right? Tyler Perry is main themes in all of his movies and shows are like the essence of that Black family love, Black experiences through family, and not just positives, negatives as well, through family relationships, things that pop up, whether it be with relationships in terms of like romantic love, but also as well, like, sibling versus siblings, uncle versus nephew, there's a lot of these things.
That's awesome. And it seems like you hit a bit on my next question, so I'll continue. Do you feel that this message is inspiring or perhaps acts as a call to action, or do you feel his perspective is representative? Do you think it is a perspective that holds true for that group of people?
I would definitely say that his message is inspiring, and I think it can be, interpreted as a call to action as well. And I mean, I cannot speak for the whole community, but I feel like many can relate, especially because he's creating movies with these elements being the basis of the movies, and they're popular. So it is clearly representative of the experience. What about you, Eric?
Yeah, and I think that, racial experiences aren't technically limited to race within a box. I feel like Black experiences should relate just as much to Hispanic experiences, and those can relate just as much to Caucasian white experiences, or mix and match anywhere in the world, So I feel like it's a very universal concept, but since we're talking specifically through the Black lens, and specifically in this topic, we tend to emphasize more on the Black experience, but really it's more of like a human experience.
Moving a little bit more forward in time, we are now going to talk about another African American director who made a big splash in film. Spike Lee has made so many films and is very, very famous for his directing. The one thing is there has now been more conversation and controversy about the depictions that are depicted in film. Spike Lee coming later in time than Gordon Parks, and as civil rights have moved on, maybe perhaps some of these more questions have come to play. A lot of people have accused him for having Afrocentric movies that really cater to the hegemonic white mainstream kind of perspective, and a lot of people really criticize this because they think that it's just wrong, and that him himself being a Black director portraying a very quote-unquote like racist and stereotypical perspective is worsening the problem, even though Spike Lee himself argues that it comes a bit from his own experiences. Along with that, he's also been accused of being sexist, as in his film Malcolm X, he didn't include anything about Malcolm X's half-sister Ella, who played a huge role in activist efforts, and many critique this as it's not recognizing women's contributions in civil rights. Anyhow, with that, have you guys ever seen a Spike Lee film? Do you perhaps have a favorite?
Yeah, I've seen Black Klansman, or I should say Black KK Klansman, because it's the 3 Ks. But I'm not like a huge Spike Lee fan, just because I haven't seen many of his movies. And that specifically is because, he's a director past my time. But yeah, I can't quite say if they're Afrocentric or not. I mean, obviously, Black Klansman is Afrocentric, but it's also set in a certain time period, so it just follows the time period, in my opinion. Jackie, how do you feel?
Personally, I feel the same. All the Invisible Children sounds familiar. I think I've watched it in the past, but I'm not too refreshed on Spike Lee and all of his films, unfortunately. I think it's a little ahead of my time as well, which is no excuse. I need to catch up on the films. But I don't think you can really say whether or not his experiences are, accurately represented. And I don't think an experience can be wrong. So I think the portrayal of what he has lived through in his movies, if it's true to what he his perspective, his lens, then it should be shared through his films. As for leaving women out, that is another issue that I cannot fight for, I'm sure there's a reason behind it, but I think Ella should have been included in the film as she was an activist. But then again, I wish I knew more on why she was left out from Spike Lee's perspective.
And that's fair and valid. Also, going along with perspectives in film, do you guys believe that Gordon Parks' film act in a similar way to Spike Lee's? How do you think the two directors compare and contrast? Does this show progress through time, or do you think this is just a continuation of a single perspective of what it means to be African American in America? I think it's really difficult because I think when there is a representation in film, for example, like I think when a Black director does get the opportunity to direct a film in like the big Hollywood scene, obviously everyone's going to be biased. And it's like, yeah, sometimes there are people that, are a little bit strange and perhaps like don't feel responsible for, I guess, being an advocate for themselves and perhaps may chase after like hegemonic like perspectives for the purpose of money. And I do feel like there is like a lot of, what's the word? Weight on people's shoulders to kind of like uphold this kind of picture of what a Black person should look like. And a lot of people do cater to like their own personal experiences. And so I think it kind of creates a lot of problems because people are like, oh, you're a face of representation, but also you have not lived the same life as me. And yeah, I guess that's not really helpful, but that's just a lot of thoughts that are just there.
Fact.
Jacqueline, do you think that the cast like impacts how films are like read or perceived?
Oh yes, of course. I think miscasting, as in like casting white people in roles that are clearly for minorities, can influence an entire film and actually ruin an entire film. I think by not having accurate representation, you're basically taking away from entire racial experiences and instead just covering it with white people, which we've already had in the past, so we do not need again, and it can ruin films. And I know recently we've actually had an argument with Tim Burton's Wednesday because he has finally included Black individuals into his films, but they are only being portrayed as villains, which has created some conflict because that's once again only giving Black people a single role as opposed to having them play everyday people and the good guys like they are in the world. Not every Black person is bad, not every white person is good. There should be a spectrum where we include different races and different positions, and I think that a lot of times with film we just revert back to the past, which is unfortunate, but there has been some progress as we've heard throughout the podcast episodes. Any other thoughts from anyone else?
I mean, go ahead.
I mean, I can, with what you were saying, Jackie, I can point that in the same direction and add a counter argument to that. Have you seen the latest Ant-Man movie by any chance?
I have not.
You have not? Okay.
Off topic, I heard it was really bad.
I feel like that's off topic.
I personally thought it was a decent movie, but I just didn't find the CGI that convincing. It really felt like a fake movie in a fake world. But I will say this: Jonathan Majors, who's a Black actor, he played the role of King the Conqueror I'd say pretty on point, right? And he's a villain. In fact, he's probably the biggest villain Marvel has ever had, bigger than Thanos, right? And this is a Black man, right? But I feel like in movies, it's about the role. I can't comment on Tim Burton's movie because I didn't see it and I don't know what it's about. But even in Marvel, you can argue now that Chadwick Boseman has passed away. In terms of Black heroes that are portrayed in the Marvel universe, they're really really don't have anyone either as a hero. You can say Falcon, who's now replacing Captain America, right? But that's because Captain America in the last Avengers movie, he kind of grew old, right? And he's no longer with us, or it doesn't seem like he's no longer.
Wait, superheroes get old? They age?
Because he went in the time machine thing, and he like went all the way to the past.
I don't know.
And then when he came back, he's really old, and so now the mantle has been passed on to the Falcon, who is played by a black actor, right? And then if you remember all the way back to the first Iron Man movie, Iron Man, of course, Robert Downey Jr. his sidekick, you could call him, was a black actor who played War Machine. Not Don Cheadle. Don Cheadle. Yeah, Don Cheadle played him.
You're looking at me as if I know actors and actresses.
And so it's never been one, except for Black Panther. But even with Black Panther, his screen time was very, very limited.
But there was also controversy about that too, wasn't there?
So we can't like, So what I'm trying to say is, you can't necessarily blame Tim Burton. If that makes sense.
Okay, I'm just gonna add a little bit more context to this conversation to help you, Mr. A.A. Ron. But the thing is, okay, with Tim Burton, I see what you're saying, because it's like, honestly, like, I guess you could consider this like a colorblind approach, but as far as like people auditioning in film, just taking people who have the skill sets to go on. So you're saying like, yes, there are people that are just great at the part and they get the part. The one thing with Tim Burton is like, previously, back before people were really pushing towards like more representation in film and it started like coming to rise, like all of Tim Burton's movies were strictly white casts, also in basically whiteface, because corpses and people want to look deadly. And then when he started integrating people, it's like, this has been multiple films and TV shows.
I thought it was just one movie.
No, this has been like a repetitive thing.
Oh, I see. Okay. See, I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Also, talking about black heroes, it's really interesting. I know this is separate from film, but you guys should look into Hebrew Brantley. He's a super sick artist, and he's African American, and he like paints pictures of like black superheroes and stuff, and he's pretty famous. He's pretty cool. He got some fine stuff. Definitely recommend. I forgot where we were on here. Oh, okay. On to our next topic of conversation is racial humor. Racial humor is something that has been prevalent throughout time. Looking at older films and television shows, racial humor was used in a very racist, negative, and prejudiced way. This was usually through terms of blackface and just a lot of, racism and Anyhow, with the increase of racial, ethnic, and cultural representation in film, many groups of individuals have begun to, quote-unquote, embrace these stereotypes by poking fun at them. The use of humor when talking about racial and or ethnic issues has been hotly debated and appearing to grow in popularity. What are your guys' thoughts on the use of humor to talk about racial subjects?
I feel like using humor is a great way to approach these topics. And it depends on the kind of humor you use as well. And who's portraying that humor, if that makes sense. I know that there are some comedians who are also directors, such as one person, and Jordan Peele. But I think you want to talk about it more, right?
I mean, I definitely can. I can definitely build on that. For example, Jordan Peele is a comedian and a director of film. He uses a lot of satire and absurdist humor to discuss racial problems. This is a approach which is both radical and ridiculed and celebrated by different people depending on different people's standpoints. Key and Peele, a Comedy Central show which ran from 2012 to 2017. It uses this approach to discuss a multitude of issues. One thing that is interesting to me is looking back at Key and Peele's skits, like a lot of it does talk about race in it like a humorous way, but also they depict and make jokes at other races outside of their own. This sounds weird, but as a kid, my dad used to be like, oh yeah, they're great because they look very like biracial. He's like, if you took a bunch of different races from around the world and mixed them together, like they're perfect for playing any part. And I was like, now looking back at that and being a lot older, I'm like, but that's just not like accurate. They're portraying and cracking jokes at other racial groups. Anyhow, but do you guys feel like it's insensitive to use racial humor, especially if you're trying to depict other groups outside of your own? Also, do you feel like this is a useful tool for educating people and making them more aware?
I feel like you have to know your audience. Key and Peele knew their audience. Mostly young adults, right? At least when I first started watching Key and Peele, I was in probably middle school sometime, 7th grade, maybe 8th grade. Up until when I was in high school, halfway through high school. So I feel like there are jokes within their skits. Like people around me growing up, like we used to joke about it a lot, sometimes to the detriment of others. All right, I'm sorry. But it's just, this is how you grow up, you know? I mean, we can't look at everything as black and white. But yeah, go ahead.
No, I think humor is a great way to cope. And I think if it is gone about correctly and it is not too over the top, which it's kind of hard to draw a line, that it can be, you know, influential. And I think what Jordan Peele does to a certain extent is draw attention with these ideas that some would consider, as you mentioned, radical or just absurd. And I think there's not much wrong with absurdity, especially if it's getting his point across and his experiences across. And I mean, I have not seen Nope yet, but Get Out and Us were extremely impactful films, which you can, it's going to be talked about for centuries because he's drawing attention to experiences that otherwise wouldn't be talked about and wouldn't be shared. And his ideas wouldn't have been shared in the 1950s. So it's good that now, in the 21st century, we get to have these films. And if it causes chaos among certain groups and people don't understand it, that's not necessarily a bad thing. These are discussions that need to be had.
Mm-hmm. I definitely know like Key and Peele was definitely kind of like the start to both of their careers, or at least like a big bump, moving up the ladder ordeal, which I'm sorry, AA Ron, but like, yeah, Key and Peele has a big effect. Like, I can't call you anything besides that. Like, AA Ron is your name.
Yeah, for those of you like hearing this podcast, Key and Peele had an episode where one of them was a substitute teacher, and the other person during a roll call, their actual name is Aaron, but the substitute teacher pronounces that AA Ron, as in saying, "Is AA Ron here? Raise your hand if you're here for roll call." So that's what Rachel's referring to.
And AA Ron is in fact here. Hello.
Roll call.
Jaqueline. You do which line?
Jaqueline? Oh my god, that came up too, didn't it?
Yeah.
Oh wow. Missed opportunities. Man, could have targeted both of you at once. Anyhow, but with that, his direction in film, I guess, has changed quite a bit now that Jordan Peele is a director. Also, his films are starting to take a bit of a different approach, but a lot of them still cater to the absurdist humor. And there's a new genre, which, did we figure out what the name of it is? It's like Afro-surrealism or something.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah? Okay, cool. But yeah, he definitely tinkers around with that, and that's been really interesting to come up. What are your guys' thoughts on his films? I mean, we talked about it a bit, but
yeah, I feel like he expands like the understanding of how Black individuals exist. For example, in Get Out, he tackled interracial dating, you could say, right? And kind of it has this absurdist humor in there, right? where his white partner was basically trying to kill him pretty much, right? Take his brains out and make him a clone of it. It's some crazy.
I don't watch the movie.
Yeah, just watch the movie if you haven't seen it yet. But yeah, I feel like he touches on that, and he for people who oppose interracial dating and interracial marriage, it's painting them as if they're crazy people, right? As if they're just absurd. So I kind of, that's my point on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely seen shows that have started using a lot of those sort of elements in other ways, and it's creepy because it will mix horror and racism, and then it kind of gets into this weird nitty gritty bit, which is not gonna lie a bit uncomfortable to watch, which is probably productive in a way, because hard subjects can be a little hard to swallow sometimes.
But it doesn't mean they shouldn't be swallowed.
Exactly. Take your meds and your vitamins and have good conversations. Mm-hmm. Also, okay, coming to a bit of a conclusion here. Talking about absurdist humor, do you guys think that there's a point where a line is drawn? For example, sorry, I'm going to talk a little bit before you can answer the question. Kara Walker is not a director, but she does do a lot of absurdist humor. She creates a lot of installation art of silhouetted figures and images that depict the white supremacist view of African Americans. She does this with the intent of emphasizing how ridiculous these depictions are, but her art is often ridiculed because a lot of people that perceive it just see it as just really offensive imaging, even though her herself sees it as it's ridiculous looking. Why aren't you laughing at it? So do you think there is a spot where humor is drawn?
I think in this case, there's no line being crossed. I think the people who are uncomfortable and consider her art to be in need of ridicule are probably the problem in itself. If you're having if you're having trouble and it makes you uncomfortable it should make you uncomfortable to look at a depiction of white supremacy. But if it's something that you don't want to see at all, it's probably because that's a little bit of yourself you're seeing in that art and it makes you uncomfortable. I think that, once again, no experience is wrong. If this is Kara Walker's experience, this is how she wants to depict it and show the world what she's experienced. It should be out there and everybody should see it. And art should not be limited.
I do agree, yeah. But I'll also add a nuance to that as well. When we sit down in front of a TV or in the theater and watch something, and whatever the director is aiming, whatever the director is trying to point out, sometimes after we finish the movie and in the media and then conversations, we tend to double down on what exactly the director said, right? And so, for example, I'll just talk about white supremacy, the conversations we have within the movie are great, right? They pose very, very strong, how do I say it? Not a change of action, but more of a change of self and how we approach our things, if that makes any sense. But it's the conversations that happen outside of that, right? In class, or with friends, or even in the media after that. Sometimes we go and directly attack a certain group of people because a director showed us that this and this is bad. I feel like we do also have to be understanding that everyone is a human being. And so not every person's experience of either white supremacy or racism is in line with everything that is posed on the media, right? So you also have to address this with some sort of humility when we're talking about another group of people that we don't identify as. That makes sense.
Yeah, wow,
so it's always nice to be nice.
Right. Very well said. I guess building on that and also kind of coming to a conclusion, at the end of the day, film is not responsible for the audience's perception or takeaway. how people perceive things is very, very differently. Our job here is just to try to educate our listeners the best that we can, help them get a little bit in tune to whatever channel or tune they're getting into. And with that, thanks for tuning in. A lot of tunes in here, but yeah, have a good day. Bye-bye.